Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Entitled People. As usual, we got some more Reddit stories for you today, so let's get right into it, friends. Entitled coworker finally got his due. 5+ years ago, I worked in an office with a coworker that always one-upped you. If you had good news, he had better news. If you had a crappy weekend, it was nothing compared to his. A coworker came in looking distraught, and we finally coaxed it out of her that her mom was recently diagnosed with malignant breast cancer. Entitled coworker overheard, and suddenly his dad was diagnosed with penile cancer and a heart attack on the same day. If looks could have killed, he would have melted through the floor. A bunch of people went to HR after that, but in true HR style, he was too important. We can't prove it's false, blah blah blah. Nothing ever happened. We knew he was full of it, and there was no way half the stuff he said was true. But it wore you down. About 5 months later, we were talking about our weekends on Monday. I casually mentioned that my nephew took state in both grade and weight in a recent wrestling tournament. Who shall be overhearing but entitled coworker? He swoops in, says, "My nephew has plenty of wrestling medals. I bet he's not as good as mine. What's his name? I want to pull up his ranking." I gave him the name because entitled coworker had jumped with both feet before I could tell my other coworkers that he's been nationally ranked since he was 6 for both grade and weight class. I also didn't say that he had recently accepted a prestigious invitation to wrestle for an international wrestling club, with a number of Olympians having come from the program. Winning state was a pre-qualifier to the program, but everyone knew he would get it done. I didn't know they posted stats for 4th graders online, but sure enough, he pulled him up on the office computer. It took only a minute before he closed the window and tried to change the subject. A small crowd had gathered at this point, so I grabbed his keyboard and with Ctrl-Shift-T, I reopened the window promptly. I don't know enough about wrestling stats to tell you how good he was, but others apparently did, and were freaking out about his stats. I knew he was good, but was apparently a savant or something. Lest we forget, people then started asking about entitled coworker's nephew and his stats. Coworker was floundering and trying his best to backpedal, but no one would let him. We searched with his last name and got no one that it could be. Entitled coworker then started saying it was his nephew on the other side. Coworker had bragged about being related to the governor, so we knew what name to search, and still, no one the right age range to be his nephew. Suddenly, entitled coworker yelled that he was in 2nd grade, so it wasn't online. My nephew's stats were online from 1st grade, so that was BS. Next came, he lives in another state. But that didn't matter, as he was quickly shown wrestlers from other states, clubs, leagues, and even genders. Coworker's face was turning every shade of red before he finally stormed away yelling something about harassment and going to HR. HR did reach out, but we pointed out the blatant hypocrisy when others filed complaints about him. A strongly worded email about unity, being a team player, and respect in the workplace was sent around, that everyone ignored. I stayed there for another 10 or so months before I moved. Entitled coworker still tried to insert himself in conversations and one-up everyone, but all it took was someone saying, "How did your nephew do in wrestling this weekend?" and he shut up. I'll meet the call count, but won't make the calls count. I worked at a call center for a collection agency for nearly 5 years. Anybody that has worked in this type of environment knows that there are all sorts of targets that are expected to be met, be they daily, monthly, or whatever. One of our targets was to make a certain number of calls per day. I believe it was 120. Naturally though, the more contact you would make with debtors, the less time there was to make other calls. It's usually not an issue, but some days you might make significantly more contact than others, and sometimes your call count might be like 2/3 of what it should be. We would get regular updates on the call count, and our manager would let us know if we were on track, and at the end of the day they would give you the final results. I found it very annoying when you would have a successful day collecting debts and generating revenue for the company, only to have a manager dwell on your call count. Any protest of, "Yes, I didn't meet the call count requirement, but hey, look at the revenue I generated today." It doesn't matter. The target must be met. Even if it wasn't a successful day, but I knew I still ended up spending much time in contact with these debtors in attempts to collect, I would ask managers to review my talk time to see that the efforts were being made to do what we are hired to do. It doesn't matter. The requirement must be met. Now, to be clear, A call only counted if someone picked up, or the call went to a voicemail box that wasn't full. The system was unable to register events otherwise. Not in service, voicemail box full, rings out with no voicemail box or answer. Meaning, if you were to make hundreds of attempts in one day, only a fraction are registered. Everyone is aware of this, but it didn't matter to the company. Well, I was tired of the unfairness of it all. It also doesn't help that the company was grossly skimming our bonuses that my department's client provided to us as a reward for successfully collecting on these debts. It was really obvious when our bonuses became random numbers, when it was only possible for them to be multiples of 5. Frustrated with this literal theft and underappreciation of successful collection, the whole point of the job, I decided to comply with the call count expectations and never be under the target again. I created a notepad file with a list of all the telephone numbers that went straight to voicemail. These are often numbers that have blocked us, or presumably the owner of the number set up as away or something. From then on, I made sure to make 15 to 20 calls per hour that would register, implying that even more calls were made that they just couldn't see, due to the way that the system registered calls. I would spread these calls out so my activity wouldn't seem suspicious, and would spend all day reading articles on the internet. Naturally, the revenue I had been generating decreased by about 80%. How come you're not collecting? Well, manager, you can see I am surpassing my call count target, and my talk time is very low, so I'm just not getting the opportunities to do so. It should be noted that whatever I was collecting after doing so was really easy. The people whose accounts we received who could pay and wanted to pay anyway. Often these people would call us, so I just relied on that to make it appear like I was doing anything at all. They started giving me lower value portfolios to work, which is fine by me. You are stealing my bonus, the very incentive I have to do more than the bare minimum anyway for a paycheck. I honestly thought I was quiet quitting, but no. I had a reputation as a valued member of our department and company, so no one wanted to fire me. I guess they just chalked up my lack of success to the portfolios they were assigning me. Steal my bonuses and dwell on a target that would be better judged as a marker of effort rather than an end-all be-all, and I couldn't care less. I was getting paid to read. This went on for nearly 2 years, until I had to leave for mental health reasons. This is a perfect example of terrible policies that are supposed to help increase productivity and revenue, but only ends up having the opposite effect. People that created these targets really need to take this kind of stuff into consideration. I do wonder if they even realize that it's punishing employees for doing a good job, and it's only going to incentivize them to do the bare minimum and play the system instead. Entitled parents tell me to F off in my own yard? Enjoy your free shower. A few years ago, I lived in a house that was a block away from a public park. It was a very large park, and I noticed 2 soccer games occurring when I left one Saturday to go to the grocery store. When I returned home about 45 minutes later, I noticed there was a truck parked beside my property. The occupants of that truck were on my property. There were 2 children dressed in soccer uniforms, their mom and dad, and a large Doberman. The Doberman was lying on a picnic blanket. The parents were setting up their family's picnic lunch, and the children were chasing each other, all on my front lawn. I couldn't believe my eyes. I pulled my car into my driveway and walked over to the family, asking them why they were on my property. The entitled mother then snarked at me. "What does it look like? We are eating lunch." I asked why they are not eating in the public park that is a block away, and she responded, "It's more peaceful here." In complete shock, I then said, "This is private property and you all need to leave now." The mother's response was, "Go f*** yourself, you little bitch." I was furious. I pay the mortgage, I do all the lawn work, and you think it's okay to trespass and tell me where to go on my own property? So this was the easiest revenge ever. I walked right beside them to the outside tap that was attached to my sprinkler system and turned it on. The family started screaming as they grabbed all their stuff as they ran to their truck. The mother and father screamed obscenities the whole time, and said that they were going to get me. Well, this is where revenge number 2 came in. I downloaded my security camera footage, which showed their license plate, and brought it to my next door neighbor, who just happened to be a police officer who was working that day. The parents were charged with trespassing, and I had a smile on my face for the rest of the day. Neighbor's son gets Memorial Day revenge. Neighbor's son, Garth, graduated college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He's in the IT department of a branch office and does IT things. Total number of employees at this office is around 20. Some are sales, some work in the office. Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people. They had an office in the basement away from the rest of the employees. This suited Garth just fine. He's a quiet, introverted young man. Highly intelligent, but he's not a social person. Would rather spend his time off gaming than live interaction. As you can imagine, he's not a big kid. Maybe $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The other 2 IT people eventually moved on to other jobs, and corporate doesn't replace them. Now Garth has 3 times the work without receiving a raise. Garth voices his concerns to Karen about workload and callouts, and he gets the standard feeble corporate responses and condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he'd say how bad it was working for Karen, but his saving grace was he was in a solitary office most of the day and did not have to have much contact with her. Until one day back in February, he got a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he's directed to start moving furniture around. Garth takes a look around and tells Karen his job does not call for moving heavy objects. Karen gets loud and calls his manhood into question in front of everyone, but Garth does not budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think up. Garth starts snooping and discovers that Karen is having an affair with a married coworker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system, which Garth has access to. Garth has created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of the sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today, from her own email account. The beauty of it all, Garth walked in Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting to Garth as he was leaving to not let the door hit him in the ass on the way out. When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they'll never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. That is it for today's stories. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed, and also subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans. So have an awesome day, and I'll see you all next time.